Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this Kendall Hunt webinar, Harnessing America's Wasted Talent, presented by our guest host today, Kendall Hunt author Peter Smith. We're really excited that you could join us today, and I think you are very much going to enjoy today's presentation. If at any point you have questions during the webinar, please feel free to throw them into the chat or the Q&A functions. We'll be addressing those throughout the presentation. But before I turn things over to our guest of honor, I'd like to just give Peter a brief intro first. Throughout his career, he's been known for successfully looking around the corner to foretell upcoming issues, challenges, and practices in post-secondary education. Throughout his career, he's been serving previously excluded learners in all ages through new models and innovation. He's the founder of two institutions, the Community College of Vermont and California State University, Monterey Bay. He has also served as the Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO and as a state senator, lieutenant governor, and congressman for the state of Vermont. He's currently the Oakland Endowed Chair and Professor of Innovative Practices in Higher Education and the Senior Advisor at the University of Maryland Global Campus. Well, I don't think I've ever facilitated a webinar for a former state senator before, so I'm very excited. Thanks for joining us today, Peter.
Well, Megan, it's great to be here. And as I was once saying to somebody, a man with a great future behind him. So it's been a great ride, and I'm really delighted to be here to talk about a subject that has become, over the last 5 decades, nearer and dearer to my heart every year. And thanks to all of you who are sacrificing some of your time to listen in on this, and hopefully I can have some perspectives that will either challenge you or open up some new doors or whatever, because the topic we're addressing today is being addressed, but needs to be, I think, addressed very thoughtfully, and it requires a great deal of rethinking. I don't think of some of our basic assumptions about higher education and learning and people and learners and talent, all these things. And I'm going to come at it really from the human perspective, really thinking about the human element, which is why I chose the title I chose, Harnessing America's Wasted Talent, because I have come to understand that by the way we have done business historically, that we have in fact excluded talent that is walking around, that we need to have a functioning democracy that is diverse in every regard, and that we are moving towards, I think, a better understanding of not only that, but how to do it and do it better. But I wanted to talk about it from the human element, as well as the how do we do business differently and better element. And I think obviously the COVID crisis has brought us all face to face with realities that for ourselves personally and professionally and the society as a whole, that we may have known about. For me, knowing about it up here, but having it committed down here, that is something that has really changed and evolved. Megan, next slide, please, and we'll get on with this. The problem, and this is sort of at 10,000 feet, but I want to understand there are two ways. I'm framing it on this piece of the deck from a more human element, but the way I initially got into thinking about this was based on Clayton Christensen's theory of disruption. And you are all probably very familiar with that. But for me, in simple English, what he was saying was that what the society is changing around us, whatever the institution is, and his initial organizations were technological corporations, as I remember it. But same is true with universities, that what got you, or colleges, what got you where you are will not necessarily get you where you want to go or keep you in business and viable and vibrant. And so when it came to colleges and universities, and this sort of first began happening for me, or understanding it this way, when I was at Cal State Monterey Bay as the founding president between 1995 and 2005, is that the traditional college model is based on the notion that the society around it is information poor, and that you need an oasis in this desert of lack of information. You need an information oasis where there are professors and laboratories and libraries, all those kinds of things. And that people have to come there because that's the only way you can get this very special thing called higher education. And for me, thinking about it organizationally, using that metaphor, the desert around us has gone green, whether we're a community college, state college, university, private, public, you name it. The desert has gone green, and there has been increasingly over the last 20 years, questions arising as to what's the best way to deliver education, for who, how, based on the fact that simply saying we've got a terrific library or we've got laboratories when you can now do lab work online or in hybrid situations, how do we justify the expense in dollars, time, you name it? Increasingly, that's become an issue. But to think about it from a more human point of view, our educational model is a business model, the traditional education model, and what is just an inescapable reality is that the assumptions behind that model, that you come to it and we know what you need to learn and we will teach you and we will tell you when you know it and how well you know it, and we will do that in a half-time or full-time program over 1, 2, 3, 4 years, or if you're in graduate school, different combinations, and that the price is the price. That model has been much friendlier, frankly, if I go back 50 years, to people who look like me than it has been to a whole lot of other people in this country. So the fact of the matter is that we are being pressured by changes in the society, changes that are driven by technology, changes that are coming from all directions. But the pressure is on the model, and understanding that the assumptions, and I would say, for instance, do we think there are great philosophers from South America or from Africa or from Asia? Do we think about an integrated approach to world history in which we understand that Northern European and American history, to be simplistic about it, are really more important than other histories and cultures. And so there's very much that is baked into this model that has been less friendly, if you will, to the learner of the future, I would argue, and to many learners who were there and would have liked to have participated but couldn't. And at the heart of it, and we've seen, outcomes have suffered. The fact of the matter is that our success rates have not been as good as we would want them to be. And I think underlying all that is a historical, cultural assumption about how we define quality. I would argue, quite frankly, that if 20 families are suing MIT and UNC for their children to get in because using affirmative action as the excuse, in fact, I think what they're doing, they're suing for brand. They want the brand on the degree. And we have confused brand with quality, which is successful completion, getting what you came for, going out and being productive in society at a price and in a way you can afford. I think we've confused those two things. absolutely until the last 15 or 20 years, some might say 30. I know that when I started the Community College of Vermont in 1971, non-campus, community-based, community professionals and qualified people being the faculty, I was accused of all sorts of things, none of which were particularly positive in terms of destroying higher education. Well, it turned out, happily, that we have that college over 50 years plus now has changed the face of higher education opportunity in the state of Vermont, precisely because of its model. So I think what we were battling then was that the traditional models that we saw that were available to us failed to respect and acknowledge the talent and the intelligence of historically disenfranchised learners. In Vermont in the early 70s, Head Start mothers in rural areas. And we could go on and on. People who just lived too far away and were too poor or too preoccupied with taking care of themselves to be able to go to college. So the problem at 10,000 feet is partly fueled by the characteristics of Christensen's disruption, but also it is also fueled innately, I believe, by the structure and assumptions of the educational model and its limitations as a business model. And collectively, we come to a place in this year, the last 5 years, where more of the same is just not going to get us where we need to go as a society and with historically disenfranchised learners. So next slide, please, Megan. We'll get there in a minute. Well, I'm going to keep Megan.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, next slide, please.
All right, are you guys able to see that?
No.
The solution?
Oh, the solution, big picture. Yes, got it. Sorry, don't mind me. So what we've got to learn how to do and build into our institutions is our ways to recognize, respect, value the intelligence and the talent, the potential of previously disenfranchised learners in substantive ways that tell them that we're not just being nice to them, that they bring value with them that we're going to build on and use. And I think at the heart of that is respecting the learning and the knowledge that they bring with them, socially, civically, culturally, economic experience, and with older learners, all of those things. And learners from disenfranchised populations, all of those things are incredibly important. Let me give you just one example. I've got a whole bunch of things I want to talk about here. I'm going to talk more about how we treat learners and how we should, and how our policies and practices may inadvertently not be as friendly as we want them to be or hope that they will be, as opposed to content. I think I'm going to talk a little bit about particular kinds of content, but that's not my interest is the culture and the climate within which content is provided or offered. One example that to me just is interesting, and it's more complicated than I'm going to make it sound, but think about English as a second language. If I want to go to a community college and my predominant language is Spanish, let's say, I need to take ESL. In most places, that's not Pell eligible. So here I am, disenfranchised, or needing something. And at the same time, I've got to learn how to speak English well enough, as opposed to, which would make me, by the way, bilingual, as opposed to saying, isn't there a way for a Spanish speaker to begin their learning in Spanish and learning English as a second language the same way we would give credit for learning Spanish as a second language. We don't do that. And so I'm not Pell eligible. People fall away because we've made the pre-enrollment for credit courses just that much more difficult and expensive for them in terms of time and money and respect. So the other kinds of things that for me are respectful of people's, one, assessment of prior learning. That's not a new concept, but we are still got a long ways to go in terms of how we actually aggressively assess and validate the learning that people bring with them and how we relate that to learning outcomes in our own curricula, our electives, our gen ed, whatever it may be. But the fact of the matter is, when we ask people to spend more time and more money to relearn something that they already know, whether they learned it in a course that was non-credit or at another college, and I know some colleges accept credit, transfer credit, but in way too many cases, it isn't counted towards a degree, or it isn't accepted at all, or whatever may be. But the point is, the loss in terms of time and credit is also connotes a lack of respect for what the learner brings with them. Or new kinds of models that we might employ. They're not new in terms of language, but weekend colleges. Online learning with support groups. There's a group called Yellow Dig. I'm sure there are several others where they're really showing tremendous value in supporting people in online learning, or in hybrid situations where people are coming to campus part-time and learning at home so they can make room for the other parts of their lives. Because what we're finding, and we have known this for quite a while, is that people that we aren't able to serve with our traditional model often have families, they have income needs they need to address, they have jobs, and so by asking them to organize their lives around higher education is really asking them, in many cases, to do something that they simply can't do. I don't have to spend a lot of time, I don't think, on business partnerships and apprenticeships, except to say that we are entering a time, and you're seeing more and more of this, when businesses are beginning to offer their own programs, and or they are wanting to be directly involved with colleges and universities in offering the programs that, from a point of view of content, are the programs and outcomes are the programs they want. I think apprenticeships and the things that places like Reach University are doing with apprenticeships is a huge, they're a huge player going forward in the higher ed business bridge and the collaboration. I really do believe that as we go forward, the workplace is going to become a significant learn place as we go forward. That what the workplace requires is going to influence, but also using the place where I work as a place where I can learn using new technologies, weekend colleges, whatever it might be. And so the big picture, again, is to find ways that accommodate and welcome people as who they are and what they bring with them, and assigning real value to what they bring, and understanding the realities of their lives in ways that will allow them to participate on their terms, as opposed to simply on the terms of the university. Okay, Megan, next slide, please. Now, here's some more granular solutions. And really, I think that the heart of this is what I've learned in the last, I'm going to say 15 years plus at Kaplan University and at University of Maryland Global Campus, most recently, is that when we have new learners, when we're trying to harness this talent that historically has been wasted, one of the things we really have to be clear and purposeful about is helping incoming learners have an absolute clarity of purpose. We're used to, I'm going to say I was anyway, the notion that college is a place where you find yourself. Now, maybe there are a bunch of other people who already knew what they wanted, but it's a growing experience. Well, yes, it is. But the fact of the matter is, these days, if we want to reach people who are not sure historically and culturally that college was meant for them, but who have plenty of talent and intelligence and experience to succeed, we have to do a much better job of helping them think about their clarity of purpose. Why am I here? What do I want? How will I know when I get what I want? What are the consequences of being successful? And so one of my notions, it's something I've been working on, is to create an introductory course sequence within Gen Ed requirements, which allows a person to first identify their purpose. Why did I come here? Then to identify, document, and award credit for learning that they bring with them, regardless of where or how it was gained. So what you're doing in the first term is creating a transcript, reducing time to certificate or the degree because they'll get advanced standing. And I would use for undergraduates Gen Ed requirements, because we can rethink Gen Ed. A lot of Gen Ed has been historically aimed at broadening. So I've got a major, but I need to take some other things too. Well, if we start to think about Gen Ed in terms of soft skills, hard skills, behaviors, in other words, requirements that are going to make me successful in life and successful in the workplace, where I'm being asked to reflect on the consequences of learning and the consequences of what I bring. I think of reflection as being the process of extracting meaning from experience. And when older learners, and I'd say anyone over the age of 24, 25, begins to qualify, but I think it's true also, and maybe slightly lesser part, for 18, 19, 20-year-olds. When learners come and we ask them to think about why they're there, we're asking them to be reflective, to begin to pull that meaning from their life experience and say, here's why I'm here. Here's what I want to do. And I think the notion of being able to look at a course like this, they are using analytical skills, they're using writing skills, they're using critical thinking skills, they're using problem-solving skills. You could organize projects where they would work on teams. But if we began to think about Gen Ed as a series of learning outcomes, as opposed to courses that were going to broaden the individual, and people who came out of Gen Ed, in fact, had saved some time, saved some money, but gotten a very clear, much clearer sense of why they're there and what their purpose is and what it means to be successful, I think that would make a huge difference. And I would then, to go to the second bullet, use the advanced placement exercise as the base, and you can do it in one course or two. But now that I've thought through why I'm there, what my purpose is, what I know, etc., now I can look at it and put together a program plan that is not semester to semester or whatever, the quarter to quarter, or however you're structured, but is really, here's the path for me to my conclusion, to my successful completion, whatever that may be. So at the end of the day, I think, yes, we care about degrees and we care about certificates, but there are an increasing number of students who are saying, I've got needs, may not fit that. And we talk about stackable credentials and all those kinds of things that go with it. But the fact of the matter is that we want learners to know what they came to get, and then to be able to say at the end of the day that they got what they came for. And if we help learners get what they came for, whatever that might be, that is a kind of success. It is including certificates and degrees, but it is way beyond that because it includes human convictions, human consequences, confidence, all the purpose, all these other things. So I think we need to think again. And this, I've described this in terms of entry level for a freshman or a sophomore, but this course sequence could be modified, could be absolutely changed and adapted. It could be upper division transfers, could be graduate students. But because the notion of helping people understand what they bring with them and people understand what their purpose is and what success looks like, that doesn't change as people get older. Next slide, please, Megan. And so who's this webinar for, in case you're asking yourself that question? Well, and I'll get to my own case in a minute, but it's for everybody. This webinar is for multiple constituencies. Yes, administrators and faculty who want to strengthen the quality and success rates of their undergraduate and graduate programs and want to reach new populations and want to do it successfully and want to make the learner the center of their purpose as opposed to the campus and the preordained notion of what the curriculum is. Obviously, DEI instructors and leaders, people teaching history, people teaching public service programs, education, nursing, other health support areas. And these issues, I'm talking about them in an educational perspective or from a higher ed perspective, but they are society-wide and they are true in many, many other areas. And so sociology faculty, history faculty, psychology faculty, and anyone working with working professionals and graduate programs, everybody needs to think about how their work in higher education is going to harness this talent that has been lost historically and ignored, and how to use the harnessing of it to create a fairer, more just society, because that's the challenge which faces us all. Megan, let's go to the last slide and I'll tell my story, and then we have any questions that people may have. First of all, thanks so much for being here and putting up with me for 30 minutes. Really, I have just finished a book, Stories from the Educational Underground, The New Frontier for Learning and Work. And it was a real learning experience for me, and much of the passion that you may have sensed, and I hope I didn't offend anybody, came from my understanding of these learners and their life stories. Because what I did in the book was interview 20 people. And they were all people who by circumstance of birth could not go to college or did not go to college. Several had gone to jail. Others had other circumstances, but they had all had something in their life that happened and they became successful. So the stories, I've had the book, the one person said it was sort of like the work that Studs Terkel did with working. Well, I want you to understand, I do not confuse myself with Studs Terkel, to the extent there's anybody out there who still remembers who he was. But I was very flattered because that's the effect that reading his work had on me 50 years ago. But what happened in the middle of this, so I've done these interviews, and it's COVID is just starting, and I'm ready to put the book together. And all of a sudden I looked sort of into my heart and I said, I can't do this book. And it was, here I am, and I'm pretty much exactly what I look like. I was incredibly fortunate, privileged, went to Phillips Academy Andover, then to Princeton, then to Harvard Graduate School of Education for my master's and my EDD. And so how can I, even after 50 years in the business, stand on a stage and preach about people whose life experience completely doesn't mirror mine. And I went downstairs to my wife and said, I can't do this. And she said, why? She's a very, very smart person, has a career in higher ed, is of indigenous descent, which means she hasn't made the same mistake others have made of claiming that they're registered when they're not, but she has indigenous blood. And I told her, and she looked out the window and she came back, she said, tell your own story. Tell them what it's like when the cake of privilege and opportunity is baked from day one. And I thought for a minute, I said, I can do that. And I went back upstairs. And so chapter 1 of the book is my story. What's important about that is that it was incredible to go through it, not from a looking in the mirror perspective, but seeing my life through the eyes and lives of these 20 interviews. And what happened was that every time I identified a trait, it wasn't about having a BA or an MA. It was, did you have somebody there to pick you up when you fell down? Were there people in your lives who expected you to do well, who gave you the benefit of the doubt when you screwed up or you didn't do so well? Were there networks of advisors and, influential people to help you? All of those things were there for me. My first example is I was flunking algebra in the 9th grade in Burlington Junior High School. I flunked. The solution, I applied, and my father applied me, and I went to Phillips Academy Andover and repeated the 9th grade. 4 years later, I graduated and went to Princeton. 4 years after that, I got my master's in teaching. 2 years after that, I started a college. Crazy story. But the fact of the matter is, none of it would have happened if my dad hadn't been able to bail me out. And then when I looked at the stories of the learners, every one of those characteristics I just mentioned, so not getting an A in history, having someone give you the benefit of the doubt, getting picked up when you fall down, networks of advisors, an off-ramp if you need to take a little rest without losing too much time. One or more of those things that happened in every one of their lives. And when that happened, they turned the corner, saw how to access better work, better education. They found programs that were respectful and accommodating to them and built their resources around their needs. But it was these cross-cutting traits or things that are present in a life of privilege. We can make those things present for everybody. And we can do it in college as well as the workplace, as well as society. So for me, that was the big learning for me doing this book, was that I saw my own life in a way that was, I'm not guilty. It is what it is. I was damn lucky. But then when I saw these gutsy, incredible people I had interviewed, what I found was when one or more of the things that happened for me automatically happened for them, boom. They plugged in the plug and they got the electricity running, and they became successful in life through education and work and social civic activity. So if you're interested, take a look. It's not that long, but that's what it meant to me. It was a real learning experience for me. Thanks so much for listening. I don't know, we got any questions, Megan?
We do. First of all, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Very fascinating. One question that pops up right away is, what's the urgency? Kind of how you alluded, like this has been a problem for a while. And so is there right now at this point any special reason we really need to get moving on implementing some of these things that you've talked about?
Well, the urgency comes from two directions. If I'm working in an institution of higher education, the sort of push urgency, I would call it, is that if the test I would say is take the 5 or 6 most important data points: tuition increases, retention, graduation, total cost, whatever it might be, numbers of students, numbers of graduates, and go back 7 years and look at the arc to the current day. Then take the same arc and go forward 7 years. Where are you as an institution? The urgency is that not for everybody, and there will be new combinations and partnerships, and I know all that, but the fact of the matter is that there are a whole lot of institutions that have to rethink how they relate to the community around them, how they relate to learners of all ages, in order to survive and prosper. And so there's a push urgency from an institutional, what's your economic model, your educational model, all those kinds of things that I talked about earlier. The pull urgency is that we have a society, I believe, has been illustrated or had the scabs torn off by COVID. We need to take very seriously the notion that everybody deserves respect, everybody deserves opportunity, almost everybody has significant talent, and that we simply haven't been able to tap that talent, haven't been willing to tap that talent the way we need to. And we need to tap that talent for civic success, for social success, for economic success, for personal success. If we're going to be the country, and we are, as a recovering politician, I can say we're sort of 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 1 step sideways. But I think we're coming to a moment of truth in terms of how we understand opportunity, and the notion that when someone fails because of the way we do things, we've blamed that on them historically. They lacked grit, they lacked intelligence. We should accept collective responsibility for that. The fact of the matter is, we are all hurt when people do not become all they can become. We are hurt as a society. So the pull urgency is, what kind of a society do we want to be? And I think we're in a time where we know what we can do. We know how to do things. I haven't got the exhaustive list. You've got my point of view on it. But there's a pull urgency, because if we don't begin to get it right and understand that we all pay when people are not served well by our educational system, we share that burden and we share that responsibility, and we got to get about it.
Excellent. We do have a couple other questions here. How do you respond to criticisms in higher education, criticisms aimed towards diversity, equity, and social justice in those spaces?
Well, the fact of the matter is that those criticisms are born out of fear. They may be born out of anger. They may be born out of ignorance. In the case of some political figures I follow, they are born out of a perceived political opportunity. And we have historically a society, a social reputation for, from time to time, dividing people by race or by gender or by sexual preference as a way of asserting an agenda. And we see some of that going on right now. From my perspective, as a recovering politician, of little note, I would say that school boards should be making their decisions. Colleges and universities should be making their decisions. If people don't like what a college is doing, they can go to another college. I think it is the notion that state or federal government would get heavily involved in determining curriculum or format or any of that. That's what accreditors are for. That's what the Distance Education Advisory Accreditation Commission is for. It's what the regional accreditors are for. So to me, a failure to embrace our diversity, to be at the very least tolerant of it, accepting of it. Not everyone is going to embrace it the same way, but failing to do that, I think we will pay some heavy price in terms of what we hope for the country and the country's future. I'm trying to be discreet and delicate.
It's hard to with some of those heavier issues. We've got another question here. What do you think is the necessary urgency for high schools to make the changes you're describing?
Great question. And absolutely. And first, I live in Santa Fe, and I know what we see now. We have high school students. I'm going to say, I think it's juniors and seniors who are getting work in state government as well as staying in high school. I mean, so we're beginning to see blending of situations where participation, maybe money's a factor, family needs you to work, whatever it is. Also, I think the notion of how you organize a person's time. I'd start with kindergarten, and the notion, we're now coming back to the notion that free time, playtime, organized music, the arts, the whole notion of STEAM as opposed to STEM, with arts in there, with science and technology and math and engineering. Rethinking because the brain is developing all the time, and the way we have come to structure, I think, too many elementary and secondary schools really, I think, may hinder development, and it will favor some people over others. So I'm not anywhere. The first school I started actually was a street academy for dropouts in Montpelier, Vermont, using community resources for high school dropouts as part of the school system. But that was 54 years ago. So I don't consider myself to be really well enough organized or knowledgeable to have a lot of specific ideas, but absolutely high school. And I know in Vermont, and I think in other places, now the community college is reaching into high schools so that high school students can begin to go to college as juniors. And I know the state agency for scholarships there is helping 9th and 10th graders begin to understand the courses they have to take in a rural area. They may not know, oh, if I want to go to Vermont Technical College, I got to take Algebra 2. So they're giving 9th graders much better information so that when they graduate, because in that state, which is where I grew up, and I still have a lot of family there, but in that state, they have one of the 10 highest high school graduation rates in the country and one of the 10 lowest college going rates in the country. So that problem can't be solved after you graduate from high school. It has to be solved within high school. And so absolutely, I wished I had better answers for you, but absolutely.
We've got time for one more question today. We've got, what are your thoughts about community schools in pre-K through 12 public schools? Do you think this is a good idea?
If you're talking about the whole notion of community schools that came out of the Mott Foundation, I think it was the Mott Foundation, oh God, 50 years ago. I mean, that I think they're terrific. I think, anything can be done well and anything can be done badly. So the point is to understand the purpose of the school. But I think the notion of having if it is a 20-hour day, having schools where there can be social services and other kinds of services, the kinds of needs that people have, or social opportunities or athletic opportunities, creating the school as a hub in the community for community participation and the growth that comes from that for individuals and for the community writ large. I think it's a great idea.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Peter. Oh, and we just affirmative that yes, that's exactly what he was referring to. So that's perfect answer. And thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We'll be reaching out to you soon with the recording and more information about Peter's book if you're interested in that. Just as an FYI, on our website, we're currently performing some routine maintenance. So if you were to request the book and get an error message, just know that it'll be available at another time, or if you refresh the page or something like that. But thank you again, everyone, for coming. Thank you again, Peter, and everyone have an amazing day.
Thank you, Megan.